remember the exact night my world began to rot from the inside out. It wasn't sudden like a car crash or an explosion, but something quieter, something that grew like mold until it covered every corner of my life. I was 41, a wife of nearly 2 decades, and the mother of a teenage daughter who was my pride, my soul, my second heartbeat. On paper, my life was perfect. My husband was a veteran, a man who carried himself with the rigid discipline of a soldier, and I was the woman who stood beside him through years of deployment, loneliness, and silence. But no one saw the cracks. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how my choices destroyed everything I thought I controlled. Tom, my husband, was strong in a way that felt both comforting and suffocating. He had served his country, seen horrors I could only imagine, and returned with eyes that never stopped scanning the horizon, as if war might follow him home. I used to love that about him, that quiet alertness, that sense that I was safe because nothing could surprise him. But after years of it, after years of silence at dinner, and nights where he stared out the window as though waiting for something to happen, I began to feel invisible. Loneliness is a dangerous thing. It whispers to you, convinces you that you deserve more, that you are owed warmth, touch, laughter, and God help me, I listened. God help. It started innocently, the way poison often does. Rick, my brother-in-law, was charming. Where Tom was quiet, warm, where Tom was distant. He knew how to make me laugh, how to lean in close when telling a story, how to remind me of the girl I used to be before life hardened me. I told myself it was harmless, just companionship, a salve for the ache Tom no longer seemed able to touch. But that's how betrayal begins, not with fire, but with a spark you don't stamp out. The first time it happened, I justified it with lies. Tom was always gone, always working, always in his head. Rick saw me. Rick made me feel alive. And if Tom couldn't give me that anymore, wasn't I allowed to find it elsewhere? The human heart is brilliant at making excuses for its own corruption. But lies breed consequences, and mine came faster than I expected. Ava. My daughter was the first to sense something was wrong. She was only 15, but she had Tom's eyes, sharp, piercing, impossible to fool. She looked at me one evening as I set the table and asked, "Why do you smile more when Uncle Rick comes over than when Dad does?" My hands froze, the plate slipping, nearly shattering. I laughed it off, but inside my stomach churned with fear. Children always know. They feel the truth before it's spoken. Still, I didn't stop. I couldn't. The more I tasted that forbidden life, the more it consumed me. I told myself Tom would never know, that he was too focused on work, too distant to notice. But Tom Walker had been trained to notice. Every detail, every inconsistency, every shift in routine. He knew long before I confessed it to myself. The night he confronted me, he didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply asked one question, his voice low, steady, terrifying in its calm. "Is it him?" I remember standing there, my breath caught in my throat, the weight of 2 decades pressing down on me. I wanted to deny it, to spin another lie, but his eyes pinned me to the truth. I nodded, just once. And in that moment, something in him broke, or maybe it hardened. His silence became my punishment. From that night forward, the air in our home shifted. He didn't leave, not right away. He didn't lash out or collapse into despair. He moved like a soldier again, efficient, methodical, preparing for a war I couldn't see. At first I thought he would forgive me, that his quiet was a sign he was processing. But then accounts froze, doors locked, conversations with lawyers began. My safety net unraveled strand by strand, until I was left dangling over an abyss of my own making. Rick promised he would shield me, that we could outrun Tom's anger. He whispered in my ear that Tom was broken, a shell of the man he once was, incapable of fighting back. But deep down I knew the truth. Tom had never lost a battle in his life. And now I was the enemy he had set his sights on. Still, pride kept me tethered to Rick, to the fantasy that I could rebuild a life out of ashes. But pride is a poison that doesn't just destroy, it blinds. I didn't see the trap until it snapped shut around us. The first sign was subtle, a letter delivered in silence, unsigned, containing photographs. Me and Rick together, Smiling, touching, proof of betrayal laid bare in black and white. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized Tom hadn't been silent out of mercy. He had been gathering evidence, building a case, preparing for a war I had already lost. And then came the night, everything shattered. Ava. My sweet Ava, who deserved none of this, who carried the weight of her parents' sins without choice. She came to me with tears in her eyes, her voice breaking as she said, "Mom, he hurt me." Her sleeve slipped and I saw the bruise on her arm unmistakably shaped by Rick's hand. The ground collapsed beneath me. Betrayal was one thing, but this was unforgivable. In that instant, every justification, every excuse I had clung to crumbled. I had not just betrayed my husband, I had betrayed my daughter. I wanted to run. I wanted to take Ava and disappear, to erase every trace of Rick from our lives. But Tom was already there, already moving with a precision that terrified me. He didn't scream, he didn't blame. He simply stepped into the role he had always known best: protector, soldier, avenger. And for the first time in years, I was afraid of the man I had married. Not because he would hurt me, but because I finally understood what it meant to be on the wrong side of his war. The morning after Ava showed me the bruise, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. My reflection was a stranger's face, eyes hollow, skin, pale lips trembling with words I could never take back. I kept replaying the moment over and over, her voice cracking her sleeve, sliding down the bruise on her arm. My daughter had needed protection, and instead of shielding her, I had delivered her straight into danger. Tom didn't confront me that morning. He didn't need to. His silence was enough heavier than any scream could have been. He moved through the house like a shadow, his jaw set, his eyes dark. Every step he took echoed with a kind of purpose that sent chills through me. This was not the husband I had once known, the man who used to kiss my forehead before leaving for deployment. This was the soldier, the strategist, the man who never missed a target. And this time, the target wasn't overseas. It was Rick. I remember Rick barging into the house later that day, full of arrogance, brushing past me as though he owned the very air I breathed. He poured himself a drink, leaned against the counter, and smirked. "He can't touch me, Ellie. Your husband's nothing but a broken vet playing tough. He's not going to win." I wanted to scream at him, to claw his face and demand how he could dare lay a hand on my child. But fear froze me. Fear and the shame of knowing I had invited him into our lives. My betrayal had opened the door and my daughter had paid the price. Tom stood in the doorway watching. Not a word, not a flicker of expression. He didn't move toward Rick, didn't lunge or explode like in the movies. He just stood there, silent, steady, measuring. Rick noticed him and chuckled nervously. "What, you going to glare me to death, Walker?" That was when I saw it, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of Tom's mouth. Not joy, not amusement. Something colder, something that told me Rick had already lost, even if he didn't realize it yet. That night, I overheard Tom on the phone. His voice was low, deliberate. "I have the evidence. Photographs, bank transfers, even the blueprints. He's done." A pause. "And yes, the bruise. My daughter will testify." He ended the call without another word, and for the first time I realized Tom hadn't just been watching. He had been collecting, building a fortress of truth around himself, while I flailed in lies. The days that followed blurred into a storm of meetings, hushed whispers, and documents I wasn't allowed to touch. Rick grew agitated, his confidence cracking. He'd storm into my apartment, demanding I talk to Tom, begging me to convince him to drop whatever he was planning. But I couldn't, because every time I looked at my daughter, I knew Tom was right. Rick deserved whatever was coming. One evening, Ava sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes red-rimmed, her voice small. "Mom, why didn't you protect me?" Her words shattered something inside me. I wanted to explain, to tell her I had been blind, selfish, lost in my own need for comfort. But none of that mattered. Excuses don't erase bruises. Apologies don't heal betrayal. All I could do was whisper, "I'm sorry," over and over until the words felt like ash on my tongue. The court summons came 2 weeks later. Fraud, assault, conspiracy, the charges stacked higher than Rick's arrogance ever had. Tom had delivered everything to the authorities, and now the man I had let into our lives was being dragged out of it in handcuffs. I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt hollow. At the hearing, I sat behind Tom and Ava, my hands trembling in my lap. Rick tried to catch my eye as they led him in his smirk gone replaced with desperation. "Ellie," he hissed under his breath. "Help me." But I couldn't. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about Ava. About Tom. About the family I had poisoned. Tom didn't look back at me once. He kept his arm around Ava's shoulders, his presence steady and unyielding. When she leaned into him, I felt the final thread snap inside me. She had chosen her protector. And it wasn't me. After the hearing, Tom finally spoke to me, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "You don't get to fix this, Eleanor. Not for me, not for her. The only thing you can do now is live with what you've done." I wanted to beg, to scream, to tell him I hadn't meant for any of this to happen, but the truth was, I had set the fire. I had struck the match, and now we were all standing in the ruins. That night, I sat alone in my empty apartment, the silence pressing down like a weight I couldn't lift. I poured a glass of wine, stared out at the city lights, and finally let the truth settle over me. Tom had won. Rick had lost. And me, I was the collateral damage, the casualty of my own betrayal. But the worst part wasn't losing Tom. It wasn't even losing Rick. It was realizing I had lost my daughter's trust. And no victory, no revenge, no justice could ever give that back. Weeks turned into months, but the weight of what I had done never left me. It clung to me like smoke after a fire, sinking into my skin, staining everything I touched. Life moved forward for everyone else, but I felt suspended in a limbo of regret and silence. Ava had changed in ways I could not undo. She was stronger now, yes, but also more guarded. Her laughter, once so effortless, came less often, and when it did, it was with her father, never with me. When she looked at me, it wasn't with anger anymore. That would have been easier. It was with distance, as though I had become a stranger occupying a space where her mother used to be. Tom built a new life with quiet efficiency. He bought a modest home not far from Ava's school, decorated with photos of their moments together. I wasn't in those pictures, of course. Birthdays, lacrosse games, even just Sunday mornings making pancakes I watched from afar as he became both mother and father, filling roles I had abandoned. It was like watching someone else live the life I had thrown away, and I hated myself for envying it. I tried to repair what I could. I called Ava, sent her messages, tried to invite her to dinner. Sometimes she agreed out of obligation more than desire. She would sit at the table, her fork scraping against the plate, answering my questions with one-word replies. I wanted to reach across to hold her hand, to beg her to see me as her mother again. But guilt formed an invisible wall between us, one I didn't know how to climb. And then there was Tom. We spoke only when necessary: custody exchanges, school meetings, the bare minimum required to co-parent. His tone was always calm, professional, as though I were a colleague he tolerated rather than the woman he had once vowed to love. But every so often, I would catch his eyes lingering on me, not with softness, but with something colder: pity. That was worse than anger. At least anger meant he still felt something. Pity meant I was already buried in the past. One evening after dropping Ava at Tom's, I sat in the car and watched her run into the house, her face lighting up when she saw him. My chest ached with a hollow kind of grief. I used to be the one who made her light up like that. I used to be her safe place. Now I was little more than a cautionary tale. The loneliness drove me back to old habits, pouring wine to drown the silence, scrolling through old photos, as if they could stitch my life back together. But nothing worked. Every picture of me smiling with Tom and Ava felt like evidence of a crime I had committed against myself. And every time I saw Rick's face in my memory, I felt the bile rise in my throat. How could I have traded everything for him? How could I have let him inside my home, my family, my daughter's life? I thought about calling Tom once late at night when the silence felt unbearable. I wanted to tell him that I still remembered the way he used to hold me after nightmares, how his steady breathing grounded me when the world felt too heavy. I wanted to tell him I still loved him in some twisted, broken way. But I didn't. Because love without trust is nothing more than a ghost, and Tom had already buried what we once had. The final nail came during one of Ava's school events. She was receiving an award, and both Tom and I were invited. I sat in the back row, trying not to draw attention, while Tom sat in the front, cheering her on with that proud smile that belonged entirely to him now. When Ava walked across the stage, her eyes found his first, her smile blooming just for him. Then briefly she glanced at me. The smile faltered. Not anger, not contempt, just absence. Like she didn't know me anymore. I cried the whole way home that night. Not loud sobs, just silent tears that blurred the road until I had to pull over. It hit me then. My revenge, my betrayal, my desperate grasp for something more had not only destroyed my marriage, it had stolen my daughter's childhood, her innocence, her trust in me. And that was the cruelest punishment of all. Tom's revenge hadn't needed fists or rage. His weapon was truth, his silence, his unwavering role as the father I had failed to be as a mother. And that was enough to dismantle me piece by piece, until I was nothing more than a shadow of the woman I once pretended to be. Now I live in a small apartment, walls, bare, life quiet. I still see Ava, of course. She still calls me Mom. But the word feels thinner now, stretched across wounds that will never fully heal. Sometimes she hugs me, sometimes she doesn't. And every time she leaves, I wonder if she'll come back. People talk about karma as if it's some mystical force, but I know better. Karma was my husband's silence. Karma was my daughter's distance. Karma was waking up every morning to the echo of choices I can never undo. I used to think betrayal was about desire, about wanting something more. Now I know betrayal is about weakness, choosing the easy escape over the hard work of love, the illusion of comfort over the messy truth of devotion. And weakness always carries a price. My name is Eleanor. I was a wife. I was a mother. And I was the architect of my own destruction. There is a moment after the chaos of betrayal and the fire of revenge have burned themselves out, when all that remains is silence. Not the heavy silence of Tom's punishment, not the awkward silence of Ava's distance, but a hollow silence that seeps into your bones. That's where I live now, in that emptiness, in the aftermath of my own ruin. Some mornings I wake up and forget, just for a breath, that everything has changed. The sunlight filters through the blinds, and I hear children laughing outside, and for a fleeting instant, I believe I'll hear Ava's footsteps padding down the hall. I'll imagine Tom's deep voice rumbling from the kitchen as he pours his coffee. But then reality sets in. The apartment is still, my phone is silent, and the only voice that fills the air is my own whispering regrets into the void. I tried dating once after everything. It was a disaster. Every man I met seemed either too kind, which only reminded me of Tom's steady presence, or too careless, echoing Rick's recklessness. I would sit across from them at some cheap restaurant, smile politely, and feel the weight of my past crushing any possibility of something new. Who could love a woman branded by betrayal, scarred by choices that ruined her family? Even I couldn't love myself most days. The truth is, I didn't just lose a husband. I didn't just lose my brother-in-law to handcuffs and scandal. I lost the version of myself that believed in second chances. The woman I was before all of this, the woman who still had hope, who still believed she could be forgiven, that woman doesn't exist anymore. I buried her the day I let Rick into my home, and every day since has been a mourning I can't escape. And yet life goes on. Ava grows older. She is 17 now, tall and graceful, her smile harder to earn, but more radiant when it appears. She visits me out of duty, maybe out of pity, and I cling to those visits like a starving person clings to crumbs. We talk about her classes, her friends, her college applications. She's brilliant. God, she's brilliant. Sometimes I catch flashes of the little girl she used to be, running through the yard, with her hair flying behind her, shouting for me to watch her. But most of the time, I see a young woman forged by fire, sharpened by pain. And I know I gave her that fire. Not as a gift, but as a scar. Tom and I speak only when necessary. Our exchanges are civil, clip deficient. What time will you pick her up? Did she finish her essay? I'll transfer the tuition payment this week. The mundane rhythm of co-parenting, stripped of intimacy, stripped of warmth. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks of me, if he remembers the woman he once loved, or if he has erased me completely, filed me away as a mission completed, a threat neutralized. The last time I saw him up close was at one of Ava's lacrosse matches. He stood at the edge of the field, his arms crossed, his presence commanding even in the crowd. Parents gravitated toward him, drawn by the quiet confidence that had once drawn me in too. He laughed at something one of them said, and I realized I hadn't heard that laugh in years. It used to belong to me, that sound. Now it belonged to the world, to anyone but me. I stayed on the opposite side of the field, pretending to watch the game, pretending not to ache every time Ava ran toward him instead of toward me. When the final whistle blew and the team rushed off the field, she went straight into his arms. I told myself it was fine, that it was natural, that she needed him more. But deep down, it tore me apart. Because no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I apologize, I will never be her safe place again. Sometimes at night I replay the choices in my head like a film reel. The first laugh with Rick, the first touch, the first lie I told Tom. I ask myself where I could have stopped, where I could have chosen differently, and whether it would have saved us. But the truth is, I think I was doomed the moment I let loneliness convince me I was entitled to more. I traded decades of devotion for a handful of fleeting thrills, and in the end, I lost everything. Now my revenge is not on Tom. It is not on Rick. It is not even on myself. My revenge is waking up every day and living with the knowledge that I destroyed the people I loved most. That is my sentence. That is my karma. And unlike court hearings or frozen bank accounts, there is no end date. If you are listening to my story, if you followed me this far, I want you to understand something. Betrayal doesn't just break marriages, it breaks children, it breaks legacies, it breaks the person you see in the mirror every morning. And once it's broken, you can glue the pieces together, but it will never be whole again. I wish I could give you a happier ending. I wish I could say Tom and I found our way back, or that Ava forgave me, or that I discovered some grand redemption. But this is not that story. This is the story of consequences, of how a moment of weakness can unravel an entire life. So if you are standing where I once stood, lonely, aching, tempted, remember me. Remember my voice. Remember what I lost. And ask yourself if the fleeting comfort is worth the permanent cost. Because I can promise you it isn't. If my story has touched you, if it has made you pause and reflect on your own choices, I ask you to support this channel. Like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories told from the raw edges of human experience. And please leave a comment. Tell me your thoughts, your reflections, your own lessons. Because sometimes the only way we survive our mistakes is by not facing them alone.